hot and muggy day for a few days. And we'll go ahead and start our commission meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So, good morning, everyone. Meeting documents are available for review down in the end next to Commissioner Heiberger. Just a reminder to silence your cell phone. And Carol is here if anyone needs a listening device. So that takes us to routine business. The first item is to consider a motion to approve the agenda.
So move. Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Next item is to approve the commission meeting minutes for May 26, 2020.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Next item are bills to be paid in the amount of $665,777.23.
Pay the bills.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any comments? Commissioner Barth.
Today's bills include 6 funerals for $13,000 and 10 occurrences of ambulance transporting decedents for another $4,000. And there's another bill I had a question on. Do you have an answer, Olivia? Okay. There's a bill, looks like a legal bill for an individual for $21,000, and it's stuck out to me.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. There are a number of reports there that I would recommend for everybody's review. Lots of really good information in those monthly reports, so I'd recommend everyone take a chance to look at those. That takes us to item 5, personnel actions. I'd consider a motion to approve the routine personnel actions.
Move for approval.
Sir. So motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Good morning, Jen. How are you?
Good morning. Jen Oddix with Human Resources. We wanted to recognize significant employee anniversaries for June 2020. With 5 years of service, we have Lenora Giles. She's a correctional officer in the jail. Several people with 15 years of service. Craig Butler, who is a sergeant in the sheriff's office. Joe Bosman, who's a captain. Julie Hofer, who is, of course, our public advocate. And Reese Dieters, who's a juvenile correctional officer at JDC. We also have 2 people with 20 years of service. Wade Hansen is a corporal in the jail. And Janelle Ingalls, who is the pretrial coordinator leader for pretrial services. So we just want to thank them for all of their years of service. And I think we have somebody here who is celebrating the anniversary. I don't know, Joe, if you wanted to say anything?
Come on, Joe.
Yes.
Don't be shy.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Joe Bosman with the Sheriff's Office. I've had the pleasure of working in front of everyone here in the Commission Office for the last several years in my command staff role, but throughout my entire career with the Sheriff's Office, it has been a joy and an honor to serve the residents of Minnehaha County. I really enjoy working for the Sheriff's Office. It's a great place to work. We have fine deputies that work there. It's an honorable integrity type of job, and we appreciate the support that the Commission has given to our office over the years.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Congratulations.
After 20 years, it seems like a long time, you know. But then you get older, and 30 years seems like...
It can all go by in the blink of an eye. That's what I've learned.
We also want to recognize all of our volunteers for May of 2020. In May, we had 253 people who volunteered their time throughout a number of different departments in the county. The museum, sheriff's office, public defender's office, public advocate's office, JDC, emergency management, jail, and safe homes. So we want to thank them for donating their time and helping our organization.
All right, thank you very much. It's always impressive to see the list of employees and their years of service to the county and the list of volunteers. Those are both very impressive lists, so thank you.
Okay, my last order of business, I guess, is our annual affirmative action plan. Thanks, Trish. This morning I'm going to share with you the results of that plan. A link to the full plan and the charts were sent out to commissioners and department heads already, as well as our diversity committee, and we met last week. We went through the plan in great detail. The charts that I'm going to discuss with you today look at employees at county in protected classes. I know you're very familiar with them. I talk to you about them every year, so I'll share the results, and then I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have as well. All the charts are organized by job group, and we are comparing workforce availability to our employee demographics, and the workforce availability in the charts will always be that red column, and we're comparing the column right next to it. So this first chart looks at employees who are minorities here at county. As you can see, we exceed our goals in 3 of the different job categories. We have very slight underutilization in the remaining 4 job categories. And in fact, if we were to hire only 1 minority in each category, we would offset that underutilization. Our next chart compares or looks at the females employed at county. We're setting really well here as well. We exceed our goal in 4 of the job categories. In 1 of the remaining categories, if we were to hire only 1 female, we'd offset that underutilization. There is then slight underutilization in 2 of the remaining job categories. Both are very small job groups. We had limited hiring opportunities in 2019 to even change those, but we know that this is an area of focus for us. Our next chart is our protected veterans here at the county. Our goal for this particular group is a nationwide benchmark. It's 5.9%, and we apply this just to our workforce as a whole versus individual job groups. So we well exceed the goal in this particular category. 9.51% of our employees here at county are protected veterans, and we do a review based on the specific job groups in this chart too, just to provide information about where they're located, but we're very happy to exceed our goals in this area. On our next chart, we have a 7% national goal that's applied throughout all of our job groups for individuals with disabilities who are employed at county. We exceed that benchmark in 5 job categories, and we'd meet the benchmark in the other 2 by hiring just 1 or 2 individuals with disabilities, so we're very close in this job group too. The next chart compares the race or ethnicity of our employee minority group, which is the green part of the column, to our workforce availability, which is shown in blue. And we wouldn't expect to have, of course, an exact 1-to-1 ratio. As you can see, we're well above in some areas. We appear to have less representation in other areas. A few years ago, we added the column or the option for our applicants and our employees to select 2 or more races as their background. So since then, we've seen a lot of those percentages in the singular categories slide over to 2 or more races. Nearly 9% of our employee group overall are minorities here at county, and the workforce availability from the census data that we use to compare against is about 6.5. So we're very pleased to show a higher percentage in this group. And the final chart that we look at is a snapshot of our workforce's gender. A little over 40% of our workforce are female. It's a slight increase from last year. Our workforce availability is about 48%, so not a great disparity there. While we don't have any strong areas of concern, of course, we're going to continue to monitor our job groups throughout the year, particularly in those areas where we are underutilized. We want to ensure that we're encouraging diversity in all of our work groups and that the county's employment employees represent our population that we're serving here at the county. Happy to answer any questions that anybody might have on the plan.
Questions for Jen?
Otherwise, I'd ask for formal approval of the plan. Once it's approved, then I'll ask elected officials to sign to indicate their support of affirmative action here at the county.
I'll make a motion to approve the plan.
Second.
Motion and a second. Just before we vote, I just want to thank you. I know this is a tremendous amount of work, but just like anything else, if you don't measure goals like this and pay attention to where you are, you don't ever make any progress. And so we really appreciate the work that the Human Resources Department does in reaching out and using creative methods to recruit so that we can continue to do better in these areas. And so thank you. We did have a motion and a second. Are there any other comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. I have the document and I'll pass it around for signatures.
Thank you. We also have a request from Chris Lilla, who's the Director of Equalization. He has asked to have the statistician position within his department reviewed. After we met with Chris, we reviewed the position. Our office agrees that the responsibilities and the minimum qualifications do warrant reclassification for this position. So we're recommending that the commission approve reclassification of this position from a pay grade 15 to a 16, effective June 13th, 2020. If it is approved, there wouldn't be any immediate budgetary impact. The individual who's currently in the role would retain her current rate of pay. And Chris is here too if you have any specific questions for him.
Commissioner Karski.
As liaison to Equalization Office, Chris did visit with me about this before submitting it, and I am fully in favor of it.
Any other comments or questions?
Motion to approve?
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you so much for your hard work.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. Good morning. How are you? This
Good morning.
Takes us to item 6, abatements recommended for approval. I'll let you.
Thank you, Commissioners, for just taking action on my statistician position. I really appreciate it, and I know my staff member will as well. On to item 6, abatements. We've got quite a list again of these again. The good news this time is they're all recommended for approval. The majority of those are one set of things, and I'll just touch on the first one. D&D Enterprises, item A, it's parcel number 40660 for 2019 in the property tax amount of $3,867.02. This one here was an office error on our part. They'd asked to combine parcels, which happened, and the old parcel failed to get voided out, so it received an inadvertent tax bill. I don't know if you want to take action on that one individually, and then the rest of them we can kind of group together except for the last one.
Okay, yep, we'll go ahead and take action on that one. Are there any questions for Chris?
Move.
Approve A.
Second.
So a motion and a second to approve abatement for D&D Enterprises Revocable Trust. All in favor?
Aye.
Oh, sorry, roll call vote.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Olivia.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion passes unanimously. So that takes
Okay.
us to the next grouping.
Yep. Item B through R are all the same scenarios. City has acquired property, and obviously the city is an exempt entity. So from the time they take possession and ownership, then at that point in time, if they own it more than 15 days of the month, that entire month is tax exempt. So these are all affecting the taxes in the rear for all of these, so they're the same scenario. So item B, City of Sioux Falls, parcel number 62962, 2019 property tax in the amount of $8.25. Item C, parcel number 10445 for the 2019 property tax in the amount of $369.05. Item D, parcel number 51312 for the 2019 property tax in the amount of $415.33. Item E, parcel number 51296, 2019 property tax in the amount of $543.91. Item F, parcel number 51325 for the 2019 property tax amount of $664.37. Item G, parcel number 51324, 2019 property tax in the amount of $599.52. Item H, parcel number 51294, 2019 property tax in the amount of $230.92. Item I, parcel number 51310, 2019 property tax, the amount of $487.13. Item J, parcel number 51289, 2019 property tax, in the amount of $470.70. Item K, parcel number 51335, 2019 property tax, the amount of $693.96. Item L, parcel number 33291, 2019 property tax, in the amount of $1,214.91. Item M, parcel number 33361, 2019 tax, in the amount of $3,174.93. Item N, parcel number 11142, 2019 property tax, in the amount of $1,508.83. Item O, parcel number 14240, 2019 property tax, in the amount of $1,302.69. Item P, parcel number 14242, 2019 property tax, in the amount of $914.90. Item Q, parcel number 14244, 2019 property tax, in the amount of $508.68. And item R, Parcel number 44585, 2019, property tax in the amount of $722.95. It's a lot of reading.
You want to read it again?
Yep. Item R, parcel number
No, I'm just teasing, totally
44585. Yeah, $722.95.
Move approval of items B through R.
Second. Participants
Madam Chair?
in the meeting.
Yes, Commissioner Barth?
Chris, why is the city getting a break? I mean, why did they acquire all these properties?
You know, a lot of them, some of these are right-of-ways, some of these I think are some flooded property. I don't know all the details on all of them, just when the ownership comes over from the city. I think some of these are some of the higher tax amounts are some flood-prone properties that they've acquired. The lower amounts, the smaller amounts, a lot of those are right-of-ways and additional takings of people's front yards and things to expand roads and corners and things. So there's a multitude of reasons.
Thank you.
All right, I lost track. Is there a motion?
There was.
Motion and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Barth. Benega. Hiberger. Karski.
Aye.
Bender.
Aye, motion passes unanimously.
And item S is the other anomaly in this week's list. This is a property owner that has built some property that, once it's complete, they are tax exempt and have made the request for tax exemption. However, at the time when it's constructed and we value it, we don't know that it's tax exempt. So once it's done and they are into that, then we've got to retroactively look at that and say they did meet the criteria and they did qualify. So we're asking for an abatement amount for Cleveland Center Apartments for parcel number 30663 for 2019 property tax in the amount of $13,394.94.
Any questions for Chris? Commissioner Benega?
Chris, what's the status of the owner? I don't need to know the name, but is it a nonprofit, a church, a
Let me
tax
take a
exempt
look here.
project?
Low-income housing.
Okay, so are they
And they're, let me look at their,
funded by tax credits?
nope, they're charitable exemption. Oh, limited liability partnership as well. Thank you.
Lawyers.
Said that with true tenderness and love. So, all right. Are there other questions regarding the Cleveland Center Apartments? LP. Commissioner Barth?
So are they renting these apartments to low-income people at below market value?
They should be, yes, if they're qualifying for that exemption.
And if they're not, do we find out? I just drove by some apartments today on 6th Street that was two-bedroom apartment for only $1,000 a month.
Yeah, some of those, we're very limited on our research capabilities on what we can or cannot do. I would sure hope that as they apply annually to the state, that the state is reviewing that for that charitable, that FEIN number, that tax exempt identification. That's really where the premise comes from. We don't decide if they're tax exempt or not. The state or the federals do, and then with that number, that issuing of that tax exempt number is what then we receive, and then they make that application to us. So we have to take it on faith that if they have that number, that they meet the criteria that's required by them by law.
Other questions? Good, Commissioner Benega?
Just one more, Chris. So is this approved by the South Dakota Department of Housing and Urban Development?
Again, that one I don't know for certain. Again, my research capabilities are fairly limited, so I don't know if they state on here, because the tax exempt number is a federal number, so I don't know if they run through South Dakota Housing on that or not. That I don't know. They're a federal 501c3 exempt.
And that's the basis for their.
That's the basis.
For the
Correct.
exemption here. It really is not the fact that it's because they have tax credit housing. It's the fact that the property is owned and operated for charitable purposes,
Correct.
as far as we know.
Yes. Some of the other ones that are tax credit, we do get that notification from those. And again, some of those, it depends on which one. Some are state, some are federal.
That's my question, because if you're applying and getting tax credits, the information that you get is a little more detailed than what we get. It's just a limited
Yeah, this one I don't
partnership.
have that.
I
so,
know. Nothing we can do about that.
No.
Anything else?
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Barth.
just for Commissioner Benega, I don't think it's by law I'm penalized if I vote against it. But I do kind of wonder if, on some of these types of things, if we shouldn't have the owners of the property come in and explain their operation, because do we trust everything that Washington DC does? Do we trust everything that Pure does? Do we trust everything that someone can finagle legally? I have questions.
Any questions that anybody else has that any of us can answer? All right, then I would consider a motion.
I'll second that.
Motion and a second. Any other comments? Roll call vote, please.
Benega.
Aye.
Hiberger. Karski.
Aye.
Barth. Bender.
Aye. Motion passes 4-1. Thank you.
Knew it
Thank
would.
you.
All right, thank you. All right, so item 7, notices and requests, there are none. Item 8, planning and zoning notices, there are none. Item 9, petition for compromise of lien, there are none. So that takes us to opportunity for public comment. Is there anyone here for public comment? Good morning.
Good morning. I ran into Commissioner Heiberger and Commissioner Bender outside, and I gave them a sort of update what's going on at the treasurer's office. I'd like to say it's better than it is, but the building being closed for a number of weeks and the COVID virus thing have caused a lot of problems down there. Currently, the wait is back to 2.5 hours, which was 2.5 to 3 hours when I came. We had it down to 15, 20 minutes or less, and same day to next day turnaround on the mail. Now they're waiting in line out there in the hot sun for 2.5 hours, and I don't find that acceptable. I think there are things that could make that a little better. Will it make it perfect? Probably not. If you maintain that social distancing thing, I don't think they can get everybody in this building, but we can certainly get a lot more people than we did before. We changed them from being able to come in the main door downstairs to the indoor. There's not a lot of space down there. They end up going out in the hot sun. And they have indicated to me that they don't think that's acceptable, and I guess I personally agree with them. We have been working a couple Saturdays. We worked, and we have been coming in an hour early for a couple of weeks. It's not going to handle the problem. I guess I have a budget that's pretty limited, and I'm asking, I guess, for some kind of guidance from you as to whether or not it would be okay if we continue to work some Saturdays and come in an hour early to accommodate the public.
Commissioner Heiberger.
Pam, you and I had this conversation a couple weeks ago about using overtime budget. At that time, there was $8,000 in your budget, and you may very likely have run through that. I don't know. We just said in the hall we'd check on that, but that was a suggestion that we made, is that you use Saturday mornings or all day Saturday if that works, depending on your staff, and that you do come in an extra hour. And I'm just really happy to see you're doing it, and I think that this commission would be happy to extend those overtime hours if we have to, the budgeted. Because this is unprecedented times. And so you and I did have this conversation recently, and
Yes,
I'm
we
glad
did,
to
and
see
I
you're
did
doing
point
it.
out that technically we'd already been doing that before you brought it up. So we were already doing those things. But I do want you to know that we could possibly, we're also short 2 employees. One employee his wife got transferred to Texas, and so his last day was Friday. And then we have another employee who retired because of the COVID virus. She thought it was too germy of an atmosphere handling the money, working with the people. So we're also too short. Those people have been hired. One of them starts this week, and I don't know if the next week, maybe the next one starts. So but it's it's a storm that came together at the wrong time, but I'm sure, like you want to provide better service to the customers in Minnehaha County. And I'm just wanted you to know that in order to do that, we're probably going to have to work Saturdays and still continue to come in an hour early.
Commissioner Karski.
So I was here this morning at 7 o'clock, and there's a line. So you were processing people at 7 o'clock this morning?
We came in an hour early to do the mail.
Okay, so people aren't getting in an hour
But
early.
I'm not taking people away then from the window that it would be available to do the mail, but we also have a backload of mail. when we were closed, they had to mail everything in. Well, when you mail in a title transfers are very complicated. People forget to sign their title laps, they forget to sign their titles. The dealer may not have given them what they want, they might not have a purchase agreement, or, so they
So
didn't
those
find
peop-
out about that. We were, at that point, 6.5 weeks behind. So we got it, didn't get their process done. We did get caught up by working those couple Saturdays and coming in early, and then this hit, and the governor's executive order did give people 60 days, at least for the March and May renewals. That doesn't apply to anything after that. So those people will be paying penalties and interest.
So my tags renew in June. I have till June 30th. I have no grace period. I have to have them renewed by that.
But the
time.
March and Mays did get a grace
Okay.
period.
And so the people that were in line at 7 o'clock are waiting for your office to open up at 8
That's-
o'clock. So
that would
I mean,
be
there
correct.
were probably 40 people in line already at 7
Yeah.
o'clock.
Well, you can tell it's about 2.5 hours if you get to the Dakota side door.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go past that, like to the courthouse, it gets closer to 3.
Okay, and then have
I've
you
been
done
handing
anything
out little
for?
things and putting flags up to see how long it's taking, and they tell me as well.
I'm okay with overtime if you could even open an hour early to help people out while it's still cool. That I think would be nice.
Well, the problem, well, you did get tents out there,
Yep, there are some tents
but
over
they're
the sidewalk.
not enough to cover
Yep.
the public, but.
But, do the mail after the end of the day, help people through the beginning of the day when it's cooler out, get them out of the line. But what about, and Pam, this is your office, you're an elected official, people being able to call in, especially those with special needs, handicaps, disabilities, that type of thing, where they could say, I'd like to, can I come in or where you set up appointments for people to come in and they are specially processed so that people with that type of need don't have to sit outside? Have you thought about doing that?
Well, until you changed where the building, how they come in the building, the handicapped people were coming down at the other end, and the handicap window is there. When you move them up to the back window, somehow they're ending up in that line. I'm not sure exactly why. They can go directly, they don't have to wait in line.
So, okay,
They can come in, they're supposed to be able to come in, and they have been doing that for at least as long as I've been there.
So people that have needs like that can come in, they
Right.
don't have to sit outside, okay. Thank
And
you.
we try to watch for them. You have Ken down there, and Ken and I have been watching for them. And to expedite things for people, we've also have people out there going through the paperwork that people have, so you don't stand there for 3 hours and then find out that you don't have your title application, or you don't have your purchase agreement, or, so, yeah.
Commissioner Heiberger.
Just, so he mentioned he has tags, and just a reminder, which I know your office is already doing this, but just a reminder, if you have tags due, don't come down here, do it on the kiosk, or you can mail it in, but I would suggest just doing them on the kiosk and not coming down here and standing in line. The other thing is when you were getting those mail, where people didn't have all the information, were you guys putting a note in there that said,
Oh, yeah.
hey,
And we called them first, if we could get them. And then if they didn't have voicemail or something, then we just returned it back with a paper that says the things that, and it has a list of different things that you might need. We highlighted the things that they did need. At first, we just sent out without highlighting and listed in that. We thought they would be able to figure out what they needed, but now we've gone to highlighting it because they don't know, so.
Commissioner Benega.
Pam, what about rerouting the line through the cooler part of the building first and then sending them out toward the hotter part of the?
And I can speak to that because that really, there's been a group of staff that I've been part of that we've met every single day since COVID started, and we've been trying to troubleshoot issues. And we did try to have a meeting with all the department heads, particularly for folks on first floor, to plan the reopening, and we invited Jeff Eckhoff from the city from SOAR to come over as we tried to talk through the social distancing and the cleanling, the sanitation and all of the issues. That plan was put in place in order to space people out in the building and allow all the other offices to have people stack up for services. That the best option seemed to be to go out the south door, because that would be most of the people, and that's why we put the tents out there. We did think of a lot of different options to try to address that, and we look at it every single day. Honestly, we met this morning and talked about it again, but that is why we bought, that's why we have the tents out there. That is why we hired somebody to direct traffic downstairs for the whole entire month of June. The commission has funded a position to help hand out information so people understand options that they have other than standing in line. So we have tried to take a lot of steps and thought through that. We gave Pam an opportunity to participate in that, and she chose to leave relatively early into that meeting. But you know, we are trying to balance the whole issue of social distancing and COVID with providing as good a customer service as we can. And I don't know, we're in phase one of what we have as a 3-phase process to reopen the building and get people back to whatever the new normal is. And we're just in phase one of that. And I anticipate that we will try to alter that in the future, but right now that's what we're trying to do. It was also very unfortunate for Pam and her office that the second day we had the building open, the entire state system went down, so then that backed us up even more. So we recognize that there are some real challenges here, and we are trying to do everything we can to make sure the public is aware of all their options that they have to do business online or remotely. But we also recognize that Pam and her office have a lot of challenges right now, and so we're continuing to monitor that situation.
And
So-
just for your own information, I did leave that meeting early, but I did send somebody up. I had an appointment with somebody that I had to deal with in the office, so. But it doesn't matter. What we're doing now doesn't seem to be the best plan, and it doesn't seem to be working in the best interest of the public. There is no reason why, even with social distancing, those people can't line up in that building, and more of them be inside than outside.
We have looked at that. We can only get about 8 to 10 more people in. And then we have the issue with all the other folks trying to get through the building. So, but Pam, we will continue to visit with you about that. And I appreciate you bringing that up today. So,
Okay. And so I just wanted to give you an update and indicate that we're trying to do, but it's probably going to require a little bit extra money to
and
do it.
I do think Commissioner Karski had a great idea that if you guys are going to be here at 7, perhaps since there already are people lined up at that time, that you could try to serve those folks and we could try to figure out a different time to work on mail. But that's up to you ultimately.
Well, the problem is that there's no time at the day that we can do any mail, because I can't take anybody away from the window. I wouldn't do it because that means those people will have to wait even longer. So if we come early and do the mail, then they're free to operate with the public.
Or Saturday hours for the public or something. But,
Yes, and we did that. We did what we thought we could afford within our budget. So,
Well, we'll try to support you budgetarily if
Okay,
you're
I
willing to
just
do
didn't
some other
wanna-
things.
I just wanted you to be aware that we'll probably have to have a supplement or something to do that.
All right.
Thank you so
for coming
much.
this morning. All right. Any other public comment this morning? Seeing none, that takes us to regular business. First item is a public hearing to consider retail on-off sale malt beverage and South Dakota Farm wine license application submitted by CCNF Retail Inc. Olivia, good morning.
Good morning. Olivia Larson with the Auditor's Office. We have a public hearing for CCNF Retail Inc. For their 2020-2021 renewal application. The reason this is necessary is because they received a violation within the current licensing period, and this did take place back in November, at which time you were briefed about it. For your reference, prior to this violation, they had not had one since 2014, and at the time, they were owned by Harms Oil Company, and in 2016, they transferred to CCNF Retail. And then, Friendly's did submit a document, stating what they've done since then and how to avoid violations in the future. That should be included in your packet. And I do believe we have a representative here if you have any questions.
Thank you. Questions? Is there a representative here today? If you want to come forward and introduce yourself, maybe it'd be helpful if you just could explain to us and the public the steps you've taken.
Sure. Good morning, Blaine Corlett, Operations Manager for Friendly's. I sent you over a packet or a copy of kind of what we've done. Ultimately, the associate was terminated the day after a failed sting. That's just the company policy. All current associates have been ServSafe certified, alcohol trained through the South Dakota Retailers Association. Our current system allows us to backtrack to see if IDs are actually scanned at the POS now. They have the ability to type in an age, but we also have the ability to scan it, and we can go back and see exactly what's happening on transactions now. Are you scanning the ID? Are you typing a number in? We frequently go back, check, make sure that IDs are actually being scanned as opposed to just a date being put in. $50 spot bonus for everybody that passes a sting. And then probably most importantly, we just discuss our duty as retailers to keep age-restricted items out of hands of people that are under 21. With tobacco going to 21, took a little bit of the complication out of it for a cashier to be able to say everybody's 21 with the exception of lottery. But we just continue to have those conversations around. It's our duty to make sure that we're doing the right thing and keeping age-restricted items in the hands of people that can buy them.
Commissioner Karski.
Mr. Corlett, thanks for being here this morning. I hope you pass on to your employees the fact that you got to be here this morning because you failed an alcohol sting. It's a hassle. I mean, for you, and I'm sure you're the one who sold the alcohol. I believe they were arrested at the point that they sold it too. Is that not
Correct.
Yeah. And then they got fired. And if they would have just done the right thing, they would have got $50, right? Appreciate your business plan or your plan for how you take care of things. I'm comfortable with renewing your license, and again, I know it was a hassle for you to come down here, but I think your employees need to know too that you were really happy to be here today.
They do.
So, yeah, facetiously, of course, yes. So, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Questions or comments this morning? All right. I would entertain a motion.
It's a public hearing, so we
Oh,
have
I'm
to-
sorry, it's a public
Yep.
hearing. Thank you for that reminder. Is there anyone here that would like to speak against the renewal of this license? Did you have anything further that you wanted to say?
No, I do not.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
It's a motion and a second. Any other comments, questions? Roll call vote, please.
Hiberger. Aye. Karski.
Aye.
Barth.
Aye.
Benega. Aye. Bender.
All right, motion passes unanimously. Thank you for being here this morning. All right, the next item is a public hearing to consider a retail on-off sale malt beverage and South Dakota farm wine license submitted by 38 Roadhouse. Olivia.
Thank you, Olivia Larson, Auditor's Office again. This is a similar situation. 38 Roadhouse also failed a compliance check in November, and so they need a public hearing in order to approve their 2020-2021 malt beverage application. For your reference, this is their first violation since ownership changed in August of 2006.
Okay.
And I believe we do have a representative here.
Okay. You can go ahead and come forward and just introduce yourself, please.
Dan Winkelpleck, I'm the owner of the 38 Roadhouse.
Madam Chair, he needs to use the mic.
Since the
Yeah, if you could
violation-
just speak into the mic, I apologize. Thank you.
Since the violation, I have taken the TAM course, and I've had meetings with my employees, and I told them that I would pay for them to take the course, and that I had to have them all have it done by August 1st. So, we tried to schedule a course at the bar, but through the COVID-19, it was almost impossible to try to get it scheduled.
So you offered it or required it, sir? I'm sorry, ma'am.
No, I told them they had to do it by August 1st.
And you're paying for it.
Yeah, and I'm paying for it.
Okay, okay.
So, and we've just had meetings, and I've let them know that, hey, it's a $1,000 fine to the bar, and that's a lot of money for a small little bar like that. And just let them know how important it is that they start making sure they card everybody. So,
You have any bonus or anything like that for passing, like the last business did? So if they do pass it,
I haven't thought about that, but, you know, I could, yeah, I could give them a bonus if they pass, you know.
It's a lot
pass the
cheaper than
sting,
failing, yes.
You know, but, that's a good idea.
Do you scan IDs, or
Don't have a scanner.
you don't have a scanner? Okay, okay. What do you typically have, one bartender on duty at a time, or? Okay, okay,
Typically, we only have one bartender on duty. And
okay.
this particular case, the gal walked in, and my bartender happened to be in the bathroom at the time, and she walked around the corner, and I was there. I thought she knew the gal, because she worked at a different bar, and she looked at her and said, well, hi, how are you? And just like that, just like she knew her forever. And so otherwise, I was gonna get up and card the girl. So, and I was partly at fault there too. But it was the gal's second day, and,
Did she have a third day?
huh?
Is she still working for you?
She's still working for me, yeah.
Commissioner Heiberger.
Do you have something on your, where they sell your alcohol at that, you know, says that today is their 21st birthday? So it's a reminder for the employees so they don't have to sit there and figure it out. So, do you know what I'm saying? If you don't have a scanner, is there something for your employee that when they,
The calendars.
so
are
that they
right
know
there.
which day they're legal? Thank you.
Yeah, there's 3 of them up there, so they can look at it right away. And I've gone through and shown them the difference of all their licenses and stuff like that. But, and I did tell them, no, you know, last week when we had a meeting, I told them you gotta get the TAM courses taken by the 1st of August. So, for one, if we ever have a violation again, it's not a $2,000 fine then.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Commissioner Karski.
Dan, correct?
yeah.
Yeah, you know, you've owned the bar for now 14 years, first violation in 14 years. I imagine that there's been other alcohol checks there, and I can guarantee that there will be in the future. So you know, 1 in 14 years, I mean, it can happen, I get that. And I just hope that we don't have to see you back here again anytime soon. So make sure your employees understand the importance of how kind of embarrassing, humbling it is for you to get to stand up here and talk to us about this stuff. So, yes.
Commissioner Barth.
It's probably been 10 years ago since I last stopped for a beer there, but it seems to me I recall seeing the previous owner bartending. Is he still there?
No, he hasn't been there probably since 2011.
Thank you. I guess additionally, I would say, you know, as a young man, it sometimes was up to me to try to get some beer. And as an old man now, it's my job to keep them from getting the beer. And so please let's work together to make sure that this doesn't happen and we don't, there just was a fatal accident in Lincoln County where alcohol is involved. And I know that stopping on my way back from Hartford at Roadhouse, I'm not having more than one, you know, at least if I'm driving. Anyway, those are my comments.
Dan, I'm wondering if just for probably my edification and for the public, if you could explain this course that you've referred to a couple of times that you've taken and that your staff is taking. What is that course all about?
It's an alcohol training course. It's through the South Dakota Retailers Association.
Okay.
So,
All right, thank you. All right, any other questions? All right, I'd entertain a motion.
Public hearing.
Oh, public hearing. Wow, I'm having a hard time this morning. Is there anyone here that'd like to speak against this license?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any other comments? Commissioner Benega.
I would just say, Dan, that since it's been since 2006 and you haven't had any violations, I will approve this, but I hope that we don't ever have to see you again on this particular topic.
okay.
I also know that everybody needed to close when we were doing the curfews, and that was a concern from the sheriff's office. So we do appreciate the fact that that's been turned around. So again, I'll approve it this time, but we really need to keep people safe and happy. And frankly, you gotta be part of the solution, not part of the problem, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, I think the point here is that the commission takes this very seriously. And I think constituents in Minnehaha County require us all to take this very seriously.
I
So we're,
did close for a month, you know, from March 27th, and I didn't reopen up until April 24th because of the 10-person limit and everything. And I lost over $7,000 in 1 month's time, and I had to reopen. I couldn't keep losing any more money.
Right.
So,
yeah, we recognize that was a significant hardship for you and many other small businesses.
Move approval.
I think we had a motion.
Nope, we already did.
And in a
Did we
second.
vote?
Nope,
No.
we have a roll call vote now, unless anybody else has comments. Okay, roll call vote, Olivia.
Karski,
Aye.
Barr,
Aye.
Benega,
Aye.
Hiberger,
Aye,
Bender.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you for being here
Thank
this
you.
morning.
thank you.
All right, that takes us to item 12, which is a brief presentation on the Board of Mental Illness. Good morning. You here by yourself this morning, Tom?
I am.
Okay.
Aaron is in hearings this morning, and so Tom Weirheim, co-chair of the Board of Mental Illness, along with Aaron Johnson, we are the joint co-chairs of the Minnehaha and Lincoln County Board of Mental Illness. We are obviously not Jim Oste, and Jim Oste would like to be probably the first one to tell you that it now takes 2 of us to do his job. But what we've dealt with in the past year, I mean, has been, we've run into, being new at this, we've run into a lot of issues. The primary one was within the first 2 weeks of us starting in this position, the tornado hit Avera Behavioral Health, and we've been here and spoke about that. Fortunately, Avera Behavioral Health and HSC worked together to get people placed, but when it comes to our budget, there were some additional costs last year we had to deal with because we had our QMHPs, our qualified mental health professionals, had to commute down to Yankton to evaluate people. Eventually we got telehealth set up, and that was kind of a blessing in disguise because obviously now we've needed to use that here with the COVID-19 situation. However, there were some individuals, before we got that set up, they were making like 1 trip a week or 1 or 2 trips a week down to Yankton to evaluate individuals. And Avera also worked with us to try and keep anybody who was on a hold up here in Minnehaha County in the limited space that Avera had at Behavioral Health. But again, a few still, when they were full or whatever, they had to move them down to HSC, so we did have to deal with that. But again, it set us up for where we're at now as far as telehealth. We're doing that now with COVID-19 as well. We have an iPad on the unit. And then the QMHP meets with them, sits in a little room in behavioral health and evaluates that way through telehealth. We did have an issue here recently where a disgruntled patient punched the iPad, so now we are back to using Avera's iPads instead of one provided by the county. But fortunately, that's enough to get us by for right now. Doctors are back to doing inpatient visits, and so we're able to use that without too much of a logjam. There are some hurdles there that they have to deal with as well, though. But when a QMHP is evaluating somebody by telehealth, they can't see everything, obviously. They can't see if a mental health patient has maybe lacerations on their arm from a previous attempt, or they can't see if they're tapping their leg outside of the screen, or they're nervous, or that doesn't come off as well. But they're making do with what we're able to do here. So they'd like to get back to doing in-person visits. Again, we'll work with that as the COVID-19 passes, as we kind of work our way out of this. The other thing we're trying to do is use what's called the Volt system with Avera. It's their in-house text messaging rather than making phone calls. So we're trying to save a couple of steps there. With COVID-19, we've had the opportunity to try and do more things electronically, which was probably overdue. We've filed all our documents by email with the clerk now rather than going into the clerk's office and handing a stack of paper. So that saved us a little time, saved some paper. We are working with IT to kind of change the way our database works. That's how we track individuals now. We have a database set up, and that's how our offices and the the auditors know what county the individual originally came from before they end up in Minnehaha County and at the hospital or at behavioral health. And so we know we can track who to bill. And so we're working at speeding that up and maybe being able to directly, just to do more in general with that database. As far as our numbers, what we have seen is April, we typically have about 130 to 140 holds in any given month. And in April, we had about 100. And now, I don't know how to speculate on what attributed to that, whether it was people being at home and having their support system in place, that they didn't have that sort of a breakdown, or whether it was just there weren't the calls because, much like crime was down there for a short period of time, because people weren't out and about, the mental health holds were down. I don't know, but we were down 15% in April. Now May, we saw that number go back up, and we're at that 130 level again. So we don't really know where it's headed from here, whether we're going to see more, maybe individuals we haven't seen before, just because of the uncertainty of the situation, but we're kind of tracking that and watching that going forward to kind of see where our numbers go. So just a couple of things that we're trying to get ahead of and pay attention to right now, just based upon what we've seen here in the last couple of months. With that, I'll go ahead and open it up to any questions that anybody might have.
Commissioner Benega.
Tom, has HSC been able to give you more help than they have in the past with inpatient and reviews in Yankton, or have they, I mean, there was a limit for quite a while that was frankly really low, and have they been able to expand that?
Well, as far as how they're doing things right now, as far as bed numbers, I'm not exactly sure on what their numbers are. I do know that they have opened up a unit for COVID patients specifically to isolate them from the rest of the general area, just to, again, to be able to treat those, because we have seen more. I mean, the portion of mental health people who have COVID compared to the percentage of the general population is much higher than the general population.
I was going to ask you about that. What kind of growth have you seen with COVID-19?
It's been pretty consistent since it started. It's been about 15% of the holds there for a while. Now it's a little less, just like in the general population. But for that first 2-month period, it was about 15% of our holds had COVID, and I don't know whether that's because they're maybe in a group setting, or maybe just don't have the mental capacity to understand what's all going on around them. Certain individuals, that certainly could be, but it is a higher amount. So,
thank you.
Yeah. Other questions for Tom this morning?
All right. Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you very much for being here. All right, that takes us to item 13, which is a presentation by the Minnehaha County Ambulance Medical Director, Jeff Luther. I understand, Jeff, you're online on the telephone. Is that true?
That's true. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you great. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. Well, Dr. Jeff Luther, Medical Director, Quality Assurance Director for the Minnehaha County Rural Ambulance Association, or Primary Service Areas. Let me begin. I'll try and be brief, but we have so much ground to cover. What I would like to do first, I think, is just talk about 2019. And what I did is I provided a report and then a supplemental. I apologize for that, but I wanted this graphic report supplied because I think it's interesting, easy to understand, and that's kind of a recap of the entire year. But what I would like to do is just briefly talk about that fourth quarter. And during that 3-month period, I was able to pull 398 calls. Now, when I review these calls, these are from ImageTrend, which is the South Dakota electronic patient care record now that everyone is using, except for paramedics. Now it's called PCEMS. They have a different format, but that's reviewed concomitantly with the city. So Of all those cases, I was able to pull off of Image Trend, and we did have some minor glitches with that because that system was down just a bit, but we're able to capture, I think, all of the necessary information. What I did notice was a slight decrease from the third quarter, which I would attribute to that being seasonal. And again, the caveat that the calls that I pull do include mutual aid calls. So when I review the PCRs, some of those could be redundant or duplicate, but I'm usually able to trend those out. And of course, we have to wait for the PCR to be filled out by the provider. But there's usual consistency now with this Image Trend. So I think that what we're able to see is the QA process is much easier. Now, what also was underfoot throughout the whole 2019 was the development of a unified set of protocols that each service could use once we were able to get them completed and then promulgate out to the services. We did get that done, but it was just slightly after the first of the year. And then once we got all of those approved, we were in process of setting up a governance meeting with the primary service areas. Jason was working very hard to get that done, and then the whole EMS world changed at the first part of that second quarter. But again, staying within the report for 2019 and particular that fourth quarter, the QA process, I think we have that in the report. And those calls that are reviewed are those that are the critical calls that we've talked about, and in fact were in the ordinance at one point. Those include cardiac arrests, or major trauma, pediatric calls, and then I look at advanced airways. All of those that I can find, I review those. And then we do the random sampling of calls. Now, those types that I reviewed, including in that quarter, was 5 cardiac arrests, 10 major traumas. There was one listed as other, which was a complicated mental health call, 21 pediatric cases, and then the random review of 49 different types of cases or calls. All of them were accepted within the performance indicators that we picked. I did do follow-up on 5 other calls and found no remedial action needed. It was usually documentation, but again, since airway is so critical, those will fall out sometimes. And if I pick up a trend, which I have not, then I will talk with the individual medical directors on those. We also, if you recall, during that time, there was some modification in the ordinance to match the state with respect to who responds to EMS calls, and that is at least 1 EMT or higher and a driver. And so far, I'm happy to say that we have not seen any changes in the quality of that, and that it seems to be working well. Is it the best? Probably not, but I think it matches the state, and this will allow some of these services who are facing continuous problems with staffing and finding volunteers. For the report that I think is important, I also did dispatch information as I have done before, and if we look at the 448 calls in the county, these are the 911 for that quarter, that was also down a bit from the quarter before. And again, I think that was just mostly due to a seasonal change. And if we look at the total numbers, I've got a graph there that shows total EMS responses. We'll see MedStar had 187, and those calls, 118 of them were in the city of Brandon. Del Rapids had 108, Garrettson 55, Humboldt 61, and PC, now it's called PCEMS, had 37 in their primary service area. I had none for Jasper in that quarter. And if we look at the most common responses, and I'm sorry if my report is not following the slide that I'm seeing. What I'm seeing is the year total. The pie graph, so I'm up on the first part of the report. And that's okay. That I covered that, and then now here we go. The most common responses, and we can see that the majority of our responses are transfers. That holds true through. Falls are very common. Sick person is kind of a catch-all, and it is placed in this category based on certain symptom sets that the caller may have. And it's actually very common, and we usually sort those out once we're on scene. Injury accidents, 38, unconscious individuals, 25, and then breathing problems, 25. And when I said earlier, we have a lot of ground to cover, and when the second quarter, and the first, beginning of second quarter of 20, we've seen EMS change. And a lot of this is related to respiratory issues in the COVID pandemic. Those were kind of on the horizon and expected changes that we were going to trend out, and we continue to trend those, but I'll try and get into that a little later without taking up too much of the Commission's time. But continuing the report, next we look at response times. And again, if you recall, our ordinance requires the services to respond, acknowledge within 60 seconds, and then 10 minutes to respond in terms of to the station and getting en route. That's often referred to as out of shoot time. And the fourth quarter was pretty close to the third quarter. And if we look at the providers, they all met that expectation. And this bar graph will review that. If we look at our averages and then the 90 percentile, they're all in compliance with that. If we look at the en route to scene, that reflects the total time for the ambulance from the moment that the wheels start until it arrives on scene. And we have to consider also during this quarter many different other factors, including weather, and then also these areas, some of them are quite vast geographically, and so when they respond to the periphery and the fringes of these areas, obviously it just takes more time to get them. But overall, I think that we're doing very well. Garrettson has a good response time. They have Palisade Manor in the city limits, so I think that helps. And then if we move on to the next slide, that's the en route to on scene. Again, with this one, this covers that entire time. Here we go. And again, that's I think great. It's pretty impressive. And then we also have in this a combination, and that would be the next time. That's the total response time on the next slide there. That's dispatch to scene. And again, this is from the second that they acknowledge that the 911 dispatches the service. They acknowledge they're en route, and this is they're en route to on scene. Again, I think these are all great numbers if we're looking at response numbers. Again, response times is a bit of an enigma, and because there's so many variables that are involved in responses. Again, some ostensibly out of the control of the service, down roads, address inconsistencies, irregularities, those sorts of things. Now the next slide I show, again, this is just to give the Commission an idea of just what happens and how long things take to get a call, respond, treat the patient, transport the patient, clean the ambulance, and then get back into service. And I think this is a good metric, considering, and that I'm sorry, we need to move up to total call duration. I apologize. I'm trying to move this on my screen here. Okay, next slide.
I think you need to go the other direction, yeah. One more.
There we go. Yeah, that's it. Total call duration there. Just to give you a perspective on just what it takes. Now, you know, these are good times, and considering there's trauma in there, and often trauma can involve extrication. Lots of variables in there, but turnaround time to get these ambulances back into these small communities is pretty impressive, and I think that that's a testimony to the commitment and training and the collaboration. I'll move in now next to our EMS system data, and this is something that we've looked at, and then there is a response mode, and if we look at once the service is dispatched, we look at an immediate response, so we're looking at about 75% of those. Non-emergence, about 25%. Now there's also, and I'll get into that a little bit later, we have other agencies that may be on scene first, particularly our Minnehaha County Sheriff's deputies, and they can either downgrade or they can upgrade, depending on what they see first on scene. And it's a small percentage, but it's an important percentage. You can see where we've downgraded to non-emergent or a non-emergent upgraded to emergent. And we'll scroll up.
No, other way, I think.
Other way.
For us, up
Okay.
is down.
And transport mode, we'll talk a bit about that. Those that are, once the patient is triaged and treated, then we want to transport. Now, sometimes we don't know how they're transported. Is that with lights and siren, or do they just drive? Is this a transport, et cetera? But if we look at the emergent, we do know we're able to trend 37% of these calls where they respond from the scene to the destination or the hospital, emergently 37.5%. Non-emergent is 32.98%. The reason that this is important, in my opinion, is that if we're dispatched emergent, based on the call taker and the information we have, we're able to get on scene and provide pre-hospital care. And if we transport that person from an emergent call, non-emergently to the hospital, in my opinion, we've done our job. They're in process of delivering a patient in an already improved condition to the destination. So I look at those relatively close. Not always is it useful information, but on certain call types it is. And then if we look at the disposition of those calls, we see that we've got about a 69.9% treated and transported. That's pretty consistent. We see patients refusing care at about 15%. Then there's a list of these that I don't think I need to necessarily go into because the PRS, patient refuse services, that's the second one. That is an important metric that we look at because it involves all sorts of things. And we do have some that we treat and then they are released against medical advice. And then we also have some that are treated and then released to family members, such as adolescents and those sorts of things. As we scroll down again, I want to talk about the Minnehaha County Deputy EMT program. Again, this is a vital segment of our EMS community. They have been very instrumental in assisting us, and as not only as an adjunct, but now kind of as a primary resource. They have added more EMT basics, and we've got AEDs as well as other airway management available to actually all deputies. And in the quarter for 2019, I reviewed 36 county deputy EMS responses. That number is going up, and they've been involved in all manner of call types, including our critical ones, strokes, seizures, cardiac arrest. And I know in the fourth quarter of 19, a deputy helped deliver a baby. And so they've had great input, and it's led to some of the success and taken off some of the burden in our EMS system. I do have a graphic there. That's the total response time. Again, dispatch to on scene. And in this slide, I've added the Minnehaha County Sheriff's Office. You can see the times are pretty impressive. But also, we have to realize that, you know, the rubber's on the road with this service, and that is real important. They're able to provide not only pre-hospital care for us, but they're also able to size up the scene, make the scene safe, because scene safety is absolutely paramount, particularly in some of these traumas. So very impressive. I think the commission should be quite pleased with this. And then I'll try and finalize a bit here with the update on the progress of our projects that has started and ended in 2019, carried over into 2020, and that is most likely going to impact EMS across our whole region. But we completed our protocols, our unified protocols. We're able to get together a couple of governance meetings, and I've got consensus from the providers. Jason got us together, I think it was last Thursday. Everyone is on board with implementing these. We would have liked to have done that earlier in the year, but the pandemic hit, and that impacted, again, just about every facet of EMS. So with respect to the first quarter and the second quarter, I think the commission will, I'd like to provide a separate report. I'd like to wait just a bit because how all of this has changed. We're still gathering data in terms of the pandemic and how it has impacted our EMS community. And I think the mental health presenter had talked about that just previously, but there is some very interesting statistics and trend patterns that we really don't know. If we look at the ED visits across the country in the last 60 plus days, emergency room visits are down 41%. And there has been some stuff out in the blogs and the resources that I use, which is it's a community of EMS medical directors, and we provide input almost daily. But there was a concept of what's going on, where are our heart attacks, where are our strokes, and some of these critical calls. And we started to look at this. We're just assuming it's people in shelter. They're afraid, and maybe afraid to the point where they ignore symptoms and just don't call 911. What's interesting too, there's been a spike in DOA calls, whether that's related or not, but it's a little bit concerning, and we're just now delving into this and getting more and more information. After this hit, again, late first quarter, beginning of the second quarter of 20, we were empowered to change lots of things, including how we dispatch. And so our dispatching questions changed to include flu-like symptoms, cough. First started pretty broad, and as the pandemic increased in positive calls, other changes were made. We're getting information daily from the EOC, and we would meet via phone daily with representatives from police, fire, ambulance, and then hospital representation. And we would get our information from the hospitals as well as the EOC, and we would make some of our decisions based on all of that input. The collaboration to me has been very impressive. What I do is just a small piece of this, but the professionalism and the collaborative efforts of all of those that are in this community is outstanding, whether it's resource sharing or such as the PPEs, to us sharing information on how to respond, changing the dispatching. Again, we have tools that we use, emergency tools that help us guide the type of call in terms of precautions, to now if there is a call that is at risk, that's been identified and the proper precautions are taken. in the city, there's a scout system where a lot of times the patient is met at the door, assessed, and then with the remainder of the resources waiting outside, they make the decision on what to bring in to treat the patient. I think also looking at where we're headed, this will impact lots of our responses going forward. Our after action plan at this point is, we're thinking it's going to take us weeks or months to go through, but it's been a great learning process. But once I complete the information that we're looking at, there appears to be a trending down in the calls. However, with the recent protests and the gatherings, we're waiting cautiously to see if there's going to be a spike again in the call types. I also have information I can share with the commission. I would like to do that maybe July, whereby we trend respiratory type calls, and we compare those to last year, and it's pretty impressive what we see. And also, everything else that is EMS is still ongoing. You know, we have the flu, you know, with people being confined, now they're starting to come out. We'll see increases in everything from bug bites to trauma. But I've been doing this since about 1999, and I've never seen anything like this. You know, we've been through lots of things together, SARS, Ebola, lots of those things, and I guess it's very impressive that what we're facing in oftentimes very taxed services, and hopefully that we can all come out ahead on this. So I tried to be brief. There's still a lot of information I think that the commission would be interested in seeing. Overall, I think we've got great response. We've got lots of resources out there. Again, the collaboration has been pretty impressive. And, you know, we tried not to leave anybody out there standing by themselves, but sometimes getting information out there where it needs to be takes a bit of time. So having said all of that, I'll open up to any questions that the commission may have for me, and I'll do my best.
Well, thank you. Commissioner Heiberger.
I just have a comment. Thank you, Dr. Luther, for a really thorough report. And I have looked through the whole report that was sent to the commission over our Dropbox this weekend. And I just want to tell anybody out there that's listening, if you would like to see that report, it's usually filed with the auditor's office. Am I correct, Carol? I'm looking at Olivia. Yes. So this complete report, if you wanted to see more information, is on file at the auditor's office, and you could get it there.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? Well, you've certainly given us a lot to think about. It's good news to hear that you have been meeting just recently even about these unified protocols, and we'll look forward to hearing more about that, and as well as some of the other information that you alluded to. But I think we've made great progress as a commission where we didn't even used to get reports, and now you provide us these detailed reports, and we appreciate very much all the work that you do for us. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right.
All right. Be safe.
Yeah, you as well. Okay, so that takes us to item 14, which is to authorize the chair to sign an agreement with Lincoln County for building inspector services. Scott Anderson, good morning.
Thank you. Scott Anderson, Planning Director. And this is an agreement that I've been working on for a little while. It is an agreement with a proposed agreement that we would enter into a contract services with Lincoln County on an as-needed basis. And I really need to stress that because this would be sort of a stopgap coverage. It should we need to do inspections, particularly framing and final inspections, if our own building inspector was out for an extended period of time, for example, on sick leave, or maybe wanted to take like a 2-week vacation. So, and in the memo that I prepared for you, I will go out and I am able to do septic inspections, and he has sort of trained me and has shown me how to do footings inspections. So basically, those are pretty easy. Make sure there's no roots in the trench. The footings are so wide, so deep. We look for water. I mean, and he has a nice checklist for me. That's something that's relatively easy to, an inspection that's easy to conduct. But when you get into framing, there is a lot of detail when it comes to headers and steps and windows and load-bearing requirements that it's beyond what I feel the county should and myself should tackle for liability and other reasons. And then additionally, final inspections, those are something that we can sort of manipulate, aren't always needed immediately, but so that's how I perceive that we would handle these in the future, that if for some reason I needed a final or a framing inspection and our own our chief building official was not available, we could call upon Lincoln County to go down or to come up here and do the inspection for us. In the memo, I also indicated that Lincoln County already provides building services on a contract type basis for the city of Harrisburg. So this is something that they have done. I've worked with Toby Brown, the planning director. He's willing to, do this if we need. But we do need to get the basis laid for this in case it happens, because it does take a while to get the contract written, get it reviewed by the state's attorney, get both commissions to sign it. So this is sort of a preemptive piece of legislation that I hope we can get adopted. If you choose to approve it today, I have worked with Toby Brown, and I'll send this down to him, and then he will run it through Lincoln County's commission. And I think it's for, I can't remember how many years it's for. Anyway, it's for a period of time. I can't recall. I think it's 2 years?
24 months.
Yeah, thanks, 24 months. I knew we had set a time period on there. So if we approve this, it will give us a couple years to sort of see how it works out, if we use it at all, and then maybe bring it back to you as well. So I'd be glad to answer any questions you have.
Questions for Scott? I think this is the kind of collaboration that we are always trying to look for opportunities to work with other governmental entities. This seems like a perfect solution to a problem. So thank you for bringing it forward.
Make a motion to allow you to sign this contract, Madam Chair.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any other comments, questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes
Thank you.
unanimously. Thank you so much. All right, that takes us to item 15, which is to authorize the chair to sign a land purchase agreement to acquire right-of-way for culvert replacements for project number 20-01. DJ Boothie, I see you on Zoom. Good morning.
Commissioners, DJ Boothie, Highway Superintendent. This item that we have today is for the purchase of a section of right-of-way. This is on our culvert project. This project doesn't necessarily require extra right-of-way in and of itself. However, in conversations with the landowners adjacent to the culverts that are being replaced, we asked them if they would be willing to sell the right-of-way in order for us to get that total 100 feet or 50 feet on each side of the section line where we don't already have that. On the right-hand, or the top right graphic there that shows the star that's on the screen right now, that's the culvert that we're looking at with this parcel. This is about 3.5 miles south of Garrettson on County Highway 105, just north of County Highway 130. And this is from the Blythes. It's a 10-foot wide strip of right-of-way, about 2,000 feet long. So requesting your approval to purchase this right-of-way and set us up for our reconstruction project that we'll have sometime in the future. But in the short term, we're just replacing this culvert. And I can stand by for any questions.
Questions for DJ?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, DJ.
Thank you.
Have a good day. All right, that takes us to item 16, which is to authorize the chair to sign the Sioux Empire Triage Center joint participation agreement and funding commitment letter. And it seems like Carrie and Aaron should have brought fireworks and confetti with them, so.
Good morning, Commission. Carrie Benz, Human Services Department. Before you today is our joint agreement, our partnership agreement for the Community Triage Center. Obviously, you're well aware that the Triage Center has been at the forefront of a number of our leadership in the community. So namely the county, the city, Avira Hospital, as well as Sanford. And so together in December of 2019, they actually formed a nonprofit known as the Sioux Empire Triage Center, and that was incorporated on December 10th of 2019. And the board has moved forward in developing the purpose and developing our project in providing a mid-level care alternative for the nonviolent persons that are drug and alcohol, with drug and alcohol addictions and mental health care issues. And so with this joint participation agreement, it really binds all 4 partners to assure that for the next 3 years that we're committed to that project. Each year, each participant or partner is willing to, they identify how much they're willing to contribute to that project. So for the next 3 years, if you've read through the agreement, it identifies that for the county, it would be an initial and one-time $100,000 that would go toward the build-out of the project, which is going to be located at the corner of 8th and Dakota. That's the targeted location. And then for the next 3 years thereafter, it would be $400,000 a year. Noting that that monies is already being invested in our budget, in the county budget, to operate the detox center that's currently located in the jail. Obviously, one of the biggest pieces of locating the triage center outside of the jail walls is obviously it becomes much more accessible and consumer friendly as well. Receiving treatment and care should never be or felt like it is a punishment. And so by signing this agreement today, it identifies that the county is committed and will be a partner in this project for the next few years. Obviously, Commissioner Karski is a part of that. He's the vice chair of that board. And I also have Aaron Surska here, who's been pivotal in getting the budget put together, and as well as this agreement. And Alicia Kalura is here with the city. She'll be taking the same information before the city council. So if you have questions, we're here to answer those.
Questions? Nobody wants to do like a
Just, yeah,
big celebration up here?
Just it's a monumental day. It's been, you know, many,
Yes, it
many
is.
years in coming. And thank you, Carrie, for all your hard work in the beginning. And you did a trip out west to look at the first triage center ideas, and it's just ballooned from there. And it definitely has taken a lot of time. And Aaron and all the other people that have worked so hard on this, and grant dollars, and it's just been definitely a collaborative effort that started with the county and then moved into the city, and it's just been a really good. It's very exciting to see it finally opening.
It is. You're right. Thank you.
Commissioner Karski.
Well, yes, it should be fireworks and whatever. And for me, it's almost anticlimactic just after the amount of time and everything. It's like, oh, we're finally here. Because it took a lot of work to get here. A lot of work to get here. And you know, you're bringing together Sanford, Avera, and the presidents of those organizations, and the mayor, and myself, and the staff, and sheriffs, plural, and police chiefs, and I mean, just the number of people to get all this and everybody on board. It has been a lot of work, and yeah, it's been an honor to be a part of it, quite honestly. So appreciate your support on this. We've timed the county's contributions to kind of match our cash flow with collections, revenues, that type of thing. So any questions? I'm probably the least qualified to answer them, but Carrie and Aaron are here, so we'll give it our best shot.
I think you failed to call out the attorneys involved. There's a lot of, you try to put these number of people together.
We did recruit one attorney, Miles Schumacher, who I'm sure he's still wondering how did I ever accept this, agree to do this, and he has been, yeah, just the work that he's done working with civil attorneys from the city, the county, and attorneys from the healthcare organizations and getting everybody to agree where the i's should be dotted and where the commas should be has been a lot of work.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Commissioner Barth.
I tell you, from the outside of it, it's not always been clear how things were going. I'm very happy to have this come forward today, and let me say that with an investment of this large, this project needs to work.
All right. Anything else? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you all for all of your work. All right, so that takes us to item 17, liaison reports. Other liaison reports. Commissioner Heiberger?
Just report out on the library that the bookmobile is back on the road again. I think probably a little bit limited, but they are back on the road. They also started bin deliveries to the daycare centers again. They have been doing curbside pickup, which people who use the library are well aware of, but in May, they checked out nearly 16,000 items during curbside, so that is in itself a huge job. I can't even imagine how difficult that was scheduling that, but they did succeed, and now they are starting with their new program, which is a grab and go. There is scheduled online on the library's website, and the city website can get you connected there, or just go look for Siouxland Libraries, so that you can start picking out, and that is starting in Sioux Falls, but we'll be extending to rural county libraries soon. So if you want to see that schedule, just check it out. And then Dean and I met with the Public Defender's Office this morning, just went through budgets and some other issues. I don't know if Dean has anything to add to that or not. But.
Yeah, if you don't mind. Yeah, the Commissioner Heiberger, myself, and the rest of the Public Defender's Advisory Board, John Heinrich, Sid Strange, and Ryan White, met with Tracy Smith and several of her staff, and as has been said, they're budgetarily, they're on track. We looked at this year's budget, next year's budget. We looked at the staff. They are adding 2 new attorneys starting in August. They've looked at their internship programs. I personally am happy and pleased with the direction that things are going. We did ask Tracy to not only put together a 5-year plan based on what she's looking for personnel-wise, but what are you going to do with those people, and basically strategically planning for how that office will be run going forward. So I thought it was a good meeting and went well.
All right, just I'm going to just piggyback on the comments about budgets, not exactly liaison, but it's a responsibility we all have. We have budget hearings starting next Monday. Just for commissioners to be aware, we've got 2 kind of tough days on Monday and Tuesday. We've got a full day of budget on Monday, and then Tuesday we'll reconvene in the budget hearings after the commission meeting on Tuesday morning. But I know that the staff has done a lot of work on budgets. They've been I've been appreciative of their taking seriously the need to keep our budgets really conservative for next year. And so it will be a good couple of days, but I'm hopeful we can make a lot of progress after those couple of days. So, Commissioner Barth?
So I have a couple. The museum board had a meeting last week, and we did it by Zoom from their new Irene Hall facility, and it worked really great. I think there were 3 people present in the room, and the rest of us were in Zoom, so to speak. And great facility that they have out there. I know that working on the election was a stretch for the director over there, but his staff, I think, worked hard to support the auditor's office, and they feel that, they did it for the team. So secondarily, I had a meeting yesterday with the Minnehaha County Conservation District, which, by the way, has a couple of board members to be elected this fall, and they are willing to take your application should you wish to be elected. You need 25 signatures and probably at least some friends. In any case, they are looking at a grant to improve the trail in the Gevink property out there at Wall Lake, and in applying for the grant with the GF&P, the GF&P wants it to be concrete because asphalt gets too bumpy, it breaks up, and it needs to be accessible to people in wheelchairs also. So they're working on that, and they also have, just as a side, they've planted 35 acres of trees this year.
Commissioner Heiberger.
Sorry, I have one more comment. We had an SDACC call yesterday, South Dakota Association of County Commissioners, just to let us know that the association continues to work with the state on what COVID funding would be passed down to the counties, and so that is still a work in progress. And also, we talked about our convention, which is scheduled for September. I will remind you all that it is in Sioux Falls, and you got an email from the association this last week asking your possible intent to come. I would beg you to please respond to that, in the affirmative, of course, but so we can get some ideas of, there's still a few people that are concerned that we shouldn't have it at all, but I think the overarching so far has been we need to move forward with the convention, and we'll figure it out since September. So,
Madam Chair,
Commissioner
I'd
Barth.
like to ask President Heiberger a couple of questions here. She is president of the association. Cindy, I responded already, and they asked for suggestions on little programs and stuff. Are you getting those, and do
Yes.
they know that these
They don't
great
kn-
ideas were mine?
no, they do not. They do not know it was a monkey poll. I can remember. Anyway, it was a monkey poll, and
Yeah.
so they do not know who sent the responses. But yes,
They
they
did
are.
get
So
the
far, the
ideas.
responses have been 85% and greater that would like to see the convention go forward. So, but I'd like to continue to encourage people to respond to that poll. So.
All right. Anything else? Commissioner Benega.
Just real quickly, I've met a couple of times, and Cindy's participated also with the mayor's office and with our management group at the Sioux Empire Fair Board to discuss the possibilities of the Sioux Empire Fair, and that is being worked on as we speak. And the management board will come back with some positive suggestions at some point in the near future.
Okay, Commissioner Karski.
Regarding the fair, I was asked just yesterday, are all the concerts still going on as intended? Or do we have vendors and ride providers? I mean,
It's a work in progress because some of the vendors obviously have rerouted their schedules and aren't able to participate. Others have filled in or asked to fill in. So, and some of the concerts themselves are not traveling currently. So right now I would say it's, as I mentioned, a work in progress with no definitive process that's going to outline every day for every event. It is a monumental task, to be honest, and we'll keep you updated as we know the answers.
Commissioner Heiberger.
Well, I had one thing to that. Just I was texting with Scott yesterday because I'd gotten some questions from other counties, and at that yesterday they did have a carnival lined up, and with a second possibility if the first one fell through for some reason. So the carnival part's been lined up, and so they're still moving forward.
4-H isn't involved though, are they?
4-H is going to be having their achievement days at a different time period in August. I don't remember right off the top of my head those dates.
I will just add to that is that 4-H is a operating division, if you will, of the state, and the state has pretty much tied that one down to no events at the Sioux Empire Fair at this point.
All right, a lot going on, as there has been for the last 3 months, even though we've, COVID made it seem like there's less going on. I think everybody was working twice as hard trying to figure out what the next move was. So if there are no other liaison reports, I'll go to new business. Is there any new business? Commissioner Barth.
Earlier, I mentioned this one legal bill to an outside attorney for $21,000+, and that was on a habeas case in a very serious crime.
Thank you. All right. If there's no more new business, we have old business, and the auditor was kind enough to join us today to give us a little bit of update on his perspective on the primary election.
Good morning, Commission. Bob Litz from the Auditor's Office, and You know, at the canvas yesterday, we went over some things, and I think everybody kind of held back for today. I appreciate being able to be up here. You know, a lot of the things were covered pretty well, you know, by the press and the media, what have you. And so I'm not sure exactly what you'd care for me to go over. So I thought maybe, you know, if you had questions that I could address that would lead into what, you know, the heart of the topic of what you want. And I would assume that if one of you has got a question, a couple of others of you are willing to, are wondering about that as well. You know, I would tell you this, though, the development in the last couple of days is that the county has a legislative district recount between Mike Clark and Bethany Soy out in Legislative District 9, which is out Hartford Way. There was 8 ballots that separated those two, and then the city does their canvass tonight. And after that, then I think they will be taking the petitions between the Staley and the Jensen race. And I bring that up because Tom Greco and myself will be working together, you know, for the ballot tabulation and programming the machines and whatever else we have to do to make these 2 recounts successful. You know, while I'm standing here too, I wanted to give credit. You know, a lot of this focus comes on me, but you know, the good work has been done by a lot of different people. And you know, Tom Greco, when we put these elections together, we co-joined him, has just been marvelous to work with. He's an awesome person. The only thing I can pick on him about is that he's Army instead of Navy, but you know, I can forego that. Heather Irwin in my office down there did some outstanding hours and recruited a staff, and we had a staff in that office for 6 weeks that worked late at night till 9:30 or 10 at night, and then every weekend we worked there too. Some hours in the weekend. We got kicked out the day of the demonstration. Everybody's kind of miffed about that. We had to leave the building about 2:30. You know, we lost a little bit on Memorial Day weekend. The Memorial Day we took off. But outside of that, there was somebody in that office every day, you know, this year. We still undershot the amount of ballots that came in on that. I would also tell you that normally, if the COVID wasn't here, we have a worker that starts on the absentees. She's well organized, and she does a lot of the absentee work, especially like in the general election. We go out to the nursing homes if you've got 5 people who want to come forward. So looking forward, I've got a couple of candidates in mind to take her position. She was compromised and did not do the absentee this year, so that fell on the rest of us. But I've got a couple of candidates. They don't know their candidates, and I'm going to interview them and see what happens. So, but you know, the people that came forward for this election and the absentee day, I tell you, I just can't express enough gratitude for them. I was amazed by them. You know, and I was having trouble, honestly. We didn't get our last precinct location fulfilled until a week before the election, and you know, filling people in for those positions. It was difficult. I went through a lot of people. A lot of people backed out in the last 2 weeks. You know, I even had Commissioner Barth who you know, stepped up and went out to Mapleton Township, and you know, I also had 3 legislators out there working that were not on the ballot. And people say, well, isn't that a conflict of interest? No, not if they're on the ballot. And I find value in that because you got elected people actually looking at what's going on in those election places and elected officials coming down to see what's going on. I find value in that. Maybe some people don't like that, but I'll do it again unless somebody tells me not to. Also, you know, on the absentee ballots, a curious thing was that the number of ballots that we had requested and that we sent out was 40,343. The number of them that we had returned was 30,234. So we had over 20% or 25% of those ballots we mailed out to somebody. They never brought them back. I would also, I presented you folks with a graph today, kind of showing the patterns of how the absentee balloting worked this time. You know, we felt that we were handling that situation and could probably handle it up until about 2 weeks before that. And then we started realizing that we were going to fall behind. And then the last, you can see the day before the election on that graph. And I apologize for the squiggly numbers on there. It's not 10,000. You guys had my favorite techie up here when I was trying to stretch that out and shrink it so those numbers, you know, but you can figure out, you know, the ballot numbers that were on there. But anyway, I went over to the election center the day before the election. I had to get in there, and I couldn't get in the door because the ballot slot, people had dumped so many absentee ballots in there, it just wasn't open, so we had to go in another way. You know, it was a experimental type of an election. It was very gratifying in a lot of ways to see all those parts come together and do Tom and I doing what we had to do to make it work. You know, certainly there's always room for improvement in every election. There is no such thing as a perfect election. Now, and I'm not trying to dodge responsibility here, but you know, to have something of this magnitude, and I think we did a lot of things right, and a lot of people out there did a lot of things right, and I wanted to give them credit for it, not me, but them, because they showed up. You know, I just asked them to. So with those statements, I would like to open it up for questions, because I think that Gerald, or excuse me, I'm not the chair.
Mr. Benega.
Bob, I'm sure you've had the same question as most of us have had, but can you restate and tell us what the legal qualifications and restrictions are for when you can start counting absentee ballots? I think that needs to be clarified in some detail.
You know, maybe if we back up into, 45 days before the election, I get the ballots in about 48 days, and then we've got these requests that are in the queue right now. Let's use the general election, okay? Because if you checked all on your ballot request, we've got you in a queue. So 45 days before the next election, we will get those ballots, we'll stuff them in the envelope the day before, and we've got a big mail drop on that day. And from that day on, if the ballot requests come in, or they want to do the walk-in absentee, those ballots, they get sent out. And if we get it back in the mail, walk-in absentee is a lot easier because we just got it right there. The process, if you send in a request for the absentee ballots for the general election, is what we're going to do is go back and check your signature, either with your voter registration or something you've got in the past. We've got it scanned in down there. So we check that out, and then we also check your ID. You have to send a picture of your ID. This year we had kind of a neat deal where you could send the picture in instead of having to photocopy it. Now we had a special place that you could send it in. It was elections@minnehahacounty.org, which a lot of people appreciated and liked. So then we've got to get that, match those two up, your ID and your application. Now, if you mailed them in because you made a copy of it, fine. Then we have to check them out, so we send you out a ballot with a return envelope. And those get dropped in the mail. And that has to do with that 40,343 ballots. That's how many we dropped in the mail over this period of time. So after we drop those in the mail, they go to the voter presumably fills them out and sends them back in. And that was the patterns. You could see the patterns for the return on those ballots in that graph that I gave you. And once the ballots come back in, then what we have to do is take and sort them out to a precinct, and then we put them in alphabetical order in the precinct. Well, these ballots come in from all different precincts, all different times, so it's one at a time. We don't have a box of, legislative district 9 ballots. They're all mixed up, and we have to sort them out. And so that is the process that killed us, that in checking the signatures. Sue Rouse and I had a bit of a conversation. She's saying that the signatures don't have to be checked by the auditor's office anymore. It makes me a little bit nervous, but, because somebody could challenge us in court, and then we got to go back and do them. It'd be kind of a recount of sorts if some of them don't match up. The signature thing, too, it's a good way of doing it, because my signature is the same as it was in 1990 when I filled out my first voter registration after I came back to California. I had hoped it would become more elegant, but it hasn't. It's the same. And so we can do that. But there are people that have medical conditions out there they develop in between these elections, and it's hard to see, their signature. So it's not a perfect check. And I think that it's kind of a judgment call, and I don't like looking at those signatures and go, man, and then we've clearly had some where the wife has signed for the husband when they return the absentee ballots because they weren't signed, and we asked them, and she said no, goes out the car and signs them up. So what do you do with that? I mean, technically that's not allowed as a ballot. But so we go through all these checks, we alphabetize them, and then we get them ready to go over across the street. And then what happens there is they're segregated into precincts, and we have tables of 4. There's Democrat, Republican, or we can sprinkle in independent anywhere we want. And we have a very prescriptive process that we use for opening up those envelopes, putting that stamp on that ballot, and trying to keep anybody from looking at it, although after 10,000 ballots, you probably don't care who voted what. Because, I mean, the envelope's there, the signature's upside down, we slice the ballot, dump it out. Next person grabs it. I mean, there's a fleeting chance if somebody was really good, had this photographic memory that they could remember somebody, but they're probably out in Vegas instead of here looking at elections. So, but that's kind of the process. And after they open that ballot up and put them in a stack, then they get brought into the count room, and then we count them. And it just so happened that these ballots, as we were doing these, we just didn't get organized in time. We had some that were organized into the precincts, but not all of them. They kept coming in little smatterings. Normally, I would process the absentees first, but we had kind of a significant pile of absentees from the work that we had been doing for the 45 days before the election. But the absentee ballots that came in, we would get 2 or 3 of them, and it just didn't make any sense for me to run the absentees at that time, because we'd be running 2 or 3 ballots, loading them to a stick. The ballot management with doing something like that would have just been crazy. So we let those go. We ran the election day ballots first during that election, and then as the ballots, the absentee ballots, the precinct pile started piling up, we were able to run those absentee precinct ballots through the tabulators, merge them with the numbers of the polling day ballots, and that was where we got our totals from. And it was a 2-day process. You know, about midnight, 1 o'clock, we just didn't have that many ballots left to process. They were the absentees, and that was where we could process 10, 3, 2, and load them to a stick. We could have stayed there all night doing that. The paper reported that people had been up 12 hours. That was not true. They'd been up 18 and 19 hours at that point. I made the call. I called the Secretary of State and says, you know, we're just not going to be any different staying here all night, and then tomorrow when the real work starts happening, everybody's going to be bushed and it's not going to be good. And he said that it was my call. So I made a call. I've never done that before, but I made a call based on how I perceived my employees and people that were working the election. It was a health matter, you know. I mean, I would tell you this too. I've not said this, but the last 3 times that I've worked on an election, I became dehydrated, my AFib kicked in, and I had to go to the doctor. One time they kept me and put me on stuff, and that was the way it goes. I mean, it's just, you get into it, you get into the adrenaline part of it. But I sent everybody home for 5 hours. They went, you know, they caught a little bit of sleep, got to take a shower and come back. We started out fresh. So that, and you know, we kept at it all the next day, and that was kind of what happened election days.
Commissioner Heiberger and then Commissioner Benega.
I have 2 questions, and I'll spill them out, and then you can go from there. One was, I don't know if you answered his question as far as when do we have to count the absentee ballots? At what point can they be counted? And my question...
They are only able to count them on, and it's not even count them, they say process those ballots. We can run them through the tabulator on election day. So we start at when we get those ballots normally on election day and run them through. We can process them, and that was the process that I described, getting up to where we send it out and it comes back in, and then what we do to get it to the tabulator machine. Only on election day can we do that.
So my other question is can we not sort them into precincts ahead of time? Does it not, the outside of the envelope, say the precinct number or something, that they could have been in all these different boxes? And you know, why weren't they sorted ahead of time?
We were working on that. That was what was happening, and they just got ahead of us. And so then we start talking, well, is it over with? There was a couple of stutter steps on there that maybe we thought we could catch up before the day, but you know, that last week and 2 days killed us.
So they didn't all come in the day of the election day?
Oh, no. And we were working on those, and we had a lot of those sorted out.
Commissioner Benega.
Oh, well, she stole my first question. But my other question would be, is that the majority of the ballots that you have on election day that are processed at the precincts, if you will, they don't get in until toward the end of the day. So can you start counting absentee ballots right away at 7 a.m. in the morning?
Yes, and normally that is what we do. And, but you know, we gotta be careful because if we upload it, keep it stored in the computer or else on a stick if we're done with the absentees. But we can't release anything until 8 o'clock due to the time zone, you know, halfway through South Dakota. So 8 o'clock is as soon as I can release those numbers. But we can process before, yes.
Sorry. Doesn't that give you a 12-hour start on the absentee ballots if you'd start at 7 a.m. to start processing those ballots first and then waiting until the rest of the precincts come in?
Yes, under normal circumstances, that's what we did. And we were going to, we already had some stacks of the absentees there. That would have been, during a normal election, that would have been what we had. We would have either run those through and been done with those before the ballots from the polling places even come in. That's normally the way we did it. But this time here, the ballots kept coming, and we had to make a decision as to whether to just wait for the polling place and run them first or run them absentees. And if we split them in half, when we had an absentee precinct, what's called an absentee precinct, the rest of the night we were still stuck with that gap until we got every last ballot opened and processed. And there would have been a little pile of, let's say, VP3 ballots over here and another pile of VP6 ballots over here as we processed them. Yes, that would have been it, but we just didn't get her done. Did not get her done.
Commissioner Heiberger.
Well, you keep saying they kept coming in during the day. People were literally dropping off those absentee ballots that day?
The day before they were. On election day in 2014, we got the law changed. There's no absentee voting on election day because you're not absent. Right up leading up to it, and the weeks up to it, those were the ones that we still had not been able to process.
And so those 12 hours before, you guys were just opening the envelopes and stacking them?
We were still doing checks over there, and then they were on this part of, you know, where our tables were here. Yes, they were opening those envelopes and stacking them and getting them ready to tabulate. And we also had tables over there, you know, doing the sorting process as well. We had between 8 to 12 people. I think I mentioned this, 8 to 12 people since the start for 45 days over at that auditor's office, opening and processing and doing what we're supposed to do.
Other questions?
You know, I'd like to talk a little bit about that too, because, you know, at one point I considered bringing some more people in, you know, and then, you know, what it became then was we focused on, well, they won't fit in the office anymore. So are we going to move the whole shooting match over to where? The election center? Oh, well, we've got people over there. You know, we've got this COVID distancing thing. How many people can I have in a room? Which leads me to, yep, we could have done better on this election. But how about the next one? You know, what are we going to do there? And COVID rules the roost on this, okay? So what my thoughts are, and I'm not there yet, is I will tabulate the costs, I'll calculate the costs that the people who worked on absentees only did this time. And we will look back at the 2016 election, because that's the closest one I've got that's going to be applicable. We will take the absentee labor costs out of that, and then what's left should be the amount over that we would have spent on top of our absentees. Is that clear? What I'm trying to say is our normal absentee cost for labor should have been around what the 2016 election was. And so I'm going to look at those numbers, get our numbers of this last election, subtract that, and then my guess is to try to extrapolate that into how many people are going to do absentee for this next election. You know, how many are going to? Is COVID going to come out, and is the Secretary of State going to drop those things in the mail again? Those are things I don't know. But the thing that I would tell you is I want to be prepared this time, and I need some space to do this in. I need some space for maybe 20 to 40 workers. I'm not sure how many they are, but I want these people to start in. We can start filtering them in, or maybe we jump start it with 10 people 5 days after the absentees start. I don't know. But I want to get a separate room to process these ballots for the general election so this does not happen again. How I get to those numbers of people, you know, labor, how much there's going to be, how many absentee ballots are going to be, well, it's a guessing game. I can overstaff that stock if I can find the workers and, you know, guarantee it, but.
Commissioner Benninga.
Sorry. Bob and I understand that it's your responsibility, and frankly, this year is the new normal potentially. Nobody knows that for sure, but I would have to say that the expectation is going to be that we're going to continue to see a lot more absentee ballots than we ever have before. And I appreciate the fact that financially you're looking at comparative things to figure out what the costs were of 2016 versus 2020. But I think it might be time to consider having a ad hoc committee, if you will, to review this process, look at suggestions, get the city and the school district involved in the conversation, and come up with maybe some suggestions on operating changes that we might want to look at that we could lead through some of the elections that we have, because I think it's important that accuracy is the number one issue, which we've all talked about for a long time. But we're going to have another November election, and we might have the same significant absentee ballot process. And I think we need to plan for that ahead of time, and getting as many opinions to circulate and then come up with a plan, to me, would be something I'd strongly suggest that we try to process and organize. So that would be my suggestion at this point.
Well, Commissioner, do I hear you saying that you'd like to be on that?
I don't think I can do that, but
I have had several people who have come up to me and volunteered to be on that type of a group, though, and I'd be happy to share.
I would be
their
very
names. There's a
interested,
couple
because
of
that is
city councilors that are interested that have reached out to me. So I don't think we'd have any trouble staffing that group. So
I don't think so either, because I'm sure all of us have had some input that we need to listen to, of course. And I think it would just show the public that are planning for the next new normal. And I'm personally convinced that you're going to see a lot more absentee ballots for a long time, because first of all, we're not going to be over the COVID-19 totally by that time. Even if we have a vaccine, it wouldn't have been tested enough by that time. Secondly, people literally found how easy and convenient it was to do an absentee ballot just for the postage cost versus, frankly, standing in line and being subjected to other concerns. So I just think it's very important that in the next few weeks that we start that process to check the operational efficiencies and suggestions that all of us might have.
Well, you know, I had thought, you said ad hoc, does that mean?
Well, I don't know if that's the right term, because I use any term I can think of, which usually isn't correct.
Well, you know, to me, there's a formal board, and then there's this one that kind of meets and figures things out by the seat of their pants. And I think that number one, I've got to get some data that's relevant to that first, and you know, the cost thing. You know, the other thing, you know, I appreciate you saying about the accuracy thing, because that's what we've striven for every time. I also feel the pressure all the time to get things done in a hurry, you know, to hurry up. Every time we've hurried too much, there's been something we've had to go back and fix. Haste makes waste. Somehow, in this process, we have come to the conclusion that the faster we put this together and get it done, the better it is. And as I think about that, I'm not so sure that's the way everything else in the world goes. And we've got something as important as voting, and we rush through it, and that's that. And that's the big emphasis. You know, so how much taxpayer dollars do I have to spend in order to come up with some quick results? And with those quick results, who is the consumer of those quick results? You know, who's actually using that information, and it's vital to them election night? How many people? And so I think about those things. I try to be a good steward of the county dollars. I try to be maybe a little bit too tight sometimes. And, you know, so going forward, we will try to speed things up here. We will put together a ad hoc board. Gene, I appreciate you having somebody that will step up. I've got a couple of very good people in mind myself that want to come to something like that, and I was going to consult with them on this as well. But if we were going to put some sort of a board together, that would be great too.
I think it would be great to use that, you know, kind of brain trust. The commission has done that on several different issues that we've focused, and then, you know, allows you the time to think through and put together written processes written job descriptions of what different people are tasked with, timelines, and all of those kinds of things that we can try to do when the pressure's not on, so that we can show to the public that we've done the very best we could. And so I appreciate you already looking forward to the next election, because I think that is where we need to put our time and energy now. So.
No, I'd like to point a couple other things out too. A lot of the states that do the vote by mail or, increased absentee, they have an extended timeline in order to process those ballots, all of them do. California takes up to 2 weeks. And I know people go, oh, California, this, that, and the other thing. They haven't even ever been there, number one, let alone looked into the election process there. They take up to 2 weeks. India, the country of India, takes up to 6 months to tally their results. Why are we a nation that has to have that instant gratification of having it right now?
Well, and part of that's part of what you can use this group to try to balance, and maybe there's some legislative fixes that are that might be appropriate here as well. So.
Even the media, if we drug out the certain process of tabulating those ballots and making sure everything was right, they'd have 2 or 3 days to write stuff instead of just 1.
Commissioner Barth.
Thank you. Auditor Bob, I think you did a very good job this time, and I really commend your staff and the other semi-volunteers that came forward. I know that for me, working in VP4 or whatever it was, that it was a great experience. And I'll tell you that there was no surprises to it, but to actually do the process step by step, I think was educational for me as a citizen. And I know that my wife did not want me to work because I'm too old. But, I've served in the military, and I'm happy to do my duty for this process, which is part of our heritage. And I know that there are going to be issues going forward. I have 2 questions. One is, can HAVA help us with these expenses or no?
Certain ones they can. And I would tell you, I had a conversation with my liaison, Mr. Beniga, about purchasing another DS 850 machine. There are none to be had. Yeah, there won't be any, and I'll have to order it from Germany after the first of the year. So this election, for me to get an extra machine, it's not going to happen. There's a used one out there, but I question why it is used, and I don't necessarily want that. So, are there HAVA funds available? HAVA is very strict and very prescriptive in what you can spend that money for. And I think that I could spend that money on a lot of things. Now, that money is sitting in the state. The Secretary of State tends to that fund, and they're earmarked for me. And I think I got about $328,000 in there. And some of it, honestly, is left over from 2004, which to me, probably should have been used a while ago. But I've kept it because I wanted to make sure that Minnehaha County had the ability to have the latest in election technology. And we've been successful in that. Matter of fact, since 2017, the whole state is on the same system.
So second question, what about the absentee ballots? If a person requested an absentee for the school, city, the primary, do they automatically get one for the November election? Do they have to apply again?
On the application, it would be box 4, but it's not numbered. It asks you what ballots you want, and if you mark all, you get them all. If you
But I
mark
marked.
it depends on what they mark down. And some people, they think they marked all, but they didn't. So,
Well, some people think they're registered Republicans and they're not also. I had a couple people at my polling place that wanted to vote Republican and were disappointed to be NPA, no party affiliation. But I would also say that we had a couple of people, just 2 in my precinct, that brought in their absentee ballot that they had never filled out. They had the ballot, they had the envelope, they tore it up, and we let them vote on site. And I bet that with 70 precincts, you probably had 300 of those ballots that came in election day that people had never mailed.
well, it's going to be interesting this election too, because if you look at the end of that graph, we were still mailing them out the day before the election, and on election day. Some people sense of what the post office is capable of probably isn't accurate. And the post office, with their COVID things that they've put in down there, is not as fast as they once were. And I think that I'm going to be seeing quite a few ballots that'll come in late that we simply won't be able to hold. We got to keep them in a separate box, but I think that number is going to be the biggest number that I've ever had.
Commissioner Heiberger.
I don't think we addressed in this conversation the numbers that we had yesterday. We had it yesterday in our, when we canvassed the vote, we had the Republican numbers and Democrats, and there was some confusion about those numbers, which you corrected to us, but maybe publicly you should also correct
Okay,
those.
and yes, and thank you for bringing that up, Cindy. You know, and the thing was I got asked how many Republican voters there were versus Democrat voters, and on this report, you know, when I got to the elevator, I looked and the NPA had zeros in it, which meant they did not do that. So I still don't have a number of registered Democrat voters in this state today because it's not available on our system, because this is the way this report came out with the zeros on there. I'm working on that. It is a change in the software that we'll have to make. We'll have to put a formula or a program in there to split those numbers out. Right now, the NPAs and the independents are queued in with the numbers of the Democrats, and I apologize for that mistake yesterday. As soon as I got to the elevator, my face drained when I saw all those zeros on those NPA and the independent columns.
Commissioner Benega.
One more and I'm done. Just to clarify, Bob and I did talk about that second machine, and that was, what, 6-8 weeks or more ago? And unfortunately, that was the answer that Bob got. So it's not like that was a last second process. It was in the planning for quite a while, and it just didn't happen.
The whole nation has updated on these machines, and ES&S happens to be one of the finest, so that's the one that a lot of states have gone with.
All right, any other questions? We appreciate you being here today. We appreciate your willingness to tackle another election, and we look forward to hearing back from you and your group. And I'll get the names to you of the folks that have contacted me. And are
That'd be
interested
awesome.
in
You know,
helping.
and now I've got a recounts here for a couple of weeks, but we'll definitely get in touch with them. We'll set something up and explain the situation, get the data that they request, and see what's happening. So thank you for suggesting that. And you know, it's going to cost us some more money, and I don't know how much that is at this point. And I don't even want to take a guess, but anyway, we will get that done. Okay.
Bob, I haven't signed the canvassing. Do I need to run downstairs and sign that? Because I was Zoomed in yesterday. Is that necessary or not?
I think just 3 of them are.
Good.
You know, I defer to the state's attorney, but I think 3 of you had to sign that.
Okay, great.
Well, thank you, Bob.
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks for having me up here today.
Commissioner Barth?
I'd like to talk for a moment on a different subject.
Okay.
As you know, as we all know, our country has had some issues lately. It's not just the COVID, it's not just demonstrations, it's not just police activity, but, you know, we as Americans can do better. And, you know, as a faction, as a group, none of us can succeed. We can only succeed as a team, as a United States of America. And, you know, I just earlier tonight, or this morning, we said, you know, the Pledge of Allegiance, and I've repeated this many times because I first heard it used by Governor Janklow, was with liberty and justice for all. For all. It's not just for Native Americans, it's not just for women, it's for all. So as Americans, I think when we leave here, let's work to make our country better, and we're better when we're united. That's my comment.
Thank you. Anything else? All right.
Move adjournment.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. See you guys next Monday at 9 o'clock.